evening and welcome to I'm Listening, Stay Connected. I'm Listening is a 24/7, 365 initiative that works to destigmatize talking about mental health, and it's also May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, so double the importance of getting familiar, asking others about their mental health, hearing your friends come talk to you about their mental health, and normalizing us just acknowledging and discussing. We've got a great show planned for you. We have Brian Falduto and Jenny Delacruz, and we'll be talking about mental health and all the different intersections. But right now, I want to talk about quarantine fatigue. Yes, that comes with a heavy level of exhaustion. Now, a lot of us have all of our normal distractions, coping mechanisms, and our routines disrupted. So that leads to restlessness and frustration. And people are talking about just having been exhausted, although not much was done that day. Now, stimulation, we need a certain level of it. We can't be understimulated or overstimulated. And so the work is about really realizing, do you need to create more activity or do you need to limit and have less activity? The experts, we are weighing in and we're saying, of course, you got to do all the basic stuff. You got to get sleep. You got to get exercise. We're talking a lot also about connecting with nature. Yes, there's something about the natural world that normalizes it. So try to bring that into your lives, but focus especially on activity and keep all those coping mechanisms. It's going to be different right now. You're not going to have access to the ones that you traditionally have or in the ways that you're used to having them, but they are important. Stick with them. You got to build them in. Also focus on that sleep. Now, for those that are still exiting the house and going outside, we're also talking a lot about harm reduction. So you want to be avoiding enclosed spaces with large crowds, still socially distancing, wearing your mask and washing your hands as different states and local areas are kind of relaxing everything. Although here in California, we just found out we're going to be going till July. So buckle up, y'all, but we got your back. We'll be giving you all the tips you need along that way. Right now, though, let's go to Jenny Delacruz, author, family therapist, and grief and trauma expert. Brian. Oh, we're going to Brian first. Sorry, I have my notes backwards. All right. Brian Falduto, actor, songwriter, and coach. Brian, what's going on? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So let's start by just talking about mental health. How is yours right now in all of this?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm considering myself on the fortunate side of things. I'm an introvert at heart anyway, so I think that I'm in the percentage of people who felt very comfortable with all this going on. And also, I'm just trying to keep a positive outlook so that I can be of service to my clients because it's a tough time. Yeah.
Yeah. And what forms of self-care are you prioritizing these days?
Oh gosh, so much. I mean, there's so much time now, so I feel like there's no excuses. But I go on lots of walks when I can. Big fan of journaling, meditation. I've been doing a lot of yoga. I feel like home workouts are a tough area for people, but luckily I have a good relationship with yoga and I get my practice in every day. And I think connection is also really important right now. So I make sure I FaceTime at least one person a day. I guess today that's you. And and yeah, just make sure everybody's taking care of themselves, you know?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm laughing, but I love that I can be a part of just checking off that box. Done. FaceTimed with someone.
Yeah, did it.
Yeah. Those that are introverted are thriving a little better than those that are extroverted. I'm thankful for technology. I said this before. Had this happened decades ago when we didn't have the capacity to make real-time eye contact, et cetera, I don't know how we would have survived this.
Yeah, I was actually just watching something that was kind of cool because it pointed out there's arguments that we weren't prepared, right? But in a way, we were also more prepared than we've ever been because of I think the way we've rallied together and the way that spirit has shown and the way that we are able to virtually connect through technology. I don't think that if this happened during another time, yeah, I think that would be a real challenge for a lot of people.
And are you experiencing the quarantine fatigue, or are you one of those people who, like you said, as an introvert, this is just your normal energy level and your rhythm, I guess?
I mean, I work from home and I am an introvert, so it really is just kind of my rhythm. I'm also a songwriter, so I'm using a lot of the time to get writing done. Yeah, I think it'll actually be interesting for me when things start to speed back up because I will be interested to see. I've been trying to ask myself a lot of what do I miss and what do I not miss? And I don't really want to put the things that I don't miss back in my life after this. So I think there's going to be a weird balance that's going to have to be found, you know?
Yeah. Good for you for all the thriving. There's a lot of people listening to you and they're like, okay, okay, it's everyone else is struggling. But that's how I feel about the weather. The warm weather here in California, everyone's excited for it. I get reverse seasonal affective disorder. So I get depressed in the
Ooh.
warmer sun, and in the cooler, darker temperatures and weathers, I thrive and do my best. So I get it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a lot of what I've been asking my clients is like, how can we not just survive this time, but thrive during it? A lot of people keep like wishing for this return to normal, which is great. But what is normal? And like, I feel like we should try and approach each day as if we came to the earth for the first time and this was just the way that it was. Like, how would we want to live our lives? And I feel like it's obviously easier said than done, but through work, we can hopefully get to that place and live life as if this is normal life, you know?
Yeah, I think meaning making is so powerful. And that's kind of the goal I set for myself and the people I'm working with as well is, what do you want to come out of this looking back, having done with this time? Is there something that we can do that's constructive so that it doesn't just feel, restless, useless, and totally frustrating?
Yeah, totally. But also, as you were saying, like, right, I think I was listening right before I hopped on, but like, also, I think everyone also has to just do a little bit of what's best for them. And like, don't beat yourself up if this isn't your most constructive, productive time. I think that like there is no right or wrong right now. It's an unprecedented time. So we have the freedom of like not really knowing how we're supposed to respond to it. And so I think everyone just has to like do what feels good for them, honestly.
So I read something interesting about your backstory and your journey, and I thought it was a really beautiful thing. You talked about coming out as gay, and when you realized you were gay, you had to go up against your own internalized homophobia. And I thought that that's a really profound statement because we're all raised in a culture that has a lot of judgments against a lot of different minority statuses. And I thought it was really powerful to hear you acknowledge that you had that yourself and you had to work through that. How did you do that?
Well, that's kind of like what led me to becoming a life coach because I got really curious about how one does that. Like, how does one improve a relationship with themselves that is either non-existent or toxic or just like damaging? And I knew that there were options for that because I had heard about it, but I was like, what are those? What do those look like for me? And as I started to get into that process of finding that for myself, I got really excited about it because like every step of the way, I was like, oh my God, this has been available all along. I just didn't know about it. And so I kind of just like made that my passion. And along with that, I was like, well, let me now bring other people on this journey with me. One of the biggest things throughout my life is I always felt like I was doing things all alone or on my own or like in this ostracized fashion. And I was like, I want to limit the amount of people who feel that way.
That's really beautiful. I mean, I think sometimes what we call the wounded healer is really stunning because it motivates us to create some of that change. Let's also talk about some other things that I saw. Whenever I'm going to interview someone, I like to kind of deep dive on their social media and look at some of the key concepts and terms that come up. But you brought up two things that I think are really powerful and I use them a lot in my work, and it's authenticity and also compassion. And I know that, we live in a culture that's a big fan of conformity and we're really fearful of diversity. So how do you work with yourself and others around living an authentic life?
Yeah, I had a conversation the other day with someone actually on my podcast, which is about authenticity. And I think that there's like an Instagram version of authenticity that's going on. And then there's like authenticity, which my definition of authenticity is like showing up really as however you are that day. It's also like vulnerability in a sense. It's just, uh, I think that to be authentic is to acknowledge that we're always changing. So for me to like say that I've ever achieved some sort of state of authenticity is kind of the opposite of authenticity in and of itself, because I feel like the most authentic thing we can do is acknowledge that we're always changing, we're always growing, we're always developing, and we're always like learning more. And I think the goal is to just be a little less wrong than we were yesterday. And how can we just like continue being the best person each day, if that makes sense.
Totally sense. And it's so beautiful. And I think I love that you kind of called out that it's like a life's journey. You don't ever get there. It's something we're always working on. Like, what would authenticity look like for me today? And I think that that's such an important part of the definition of mental health is just letting myself be who I am and as I am. And with social media, as you pointed out, everything is so glossy and it's so perfect and it's so curated that it's hard to feel like there's space to just, as you said, put our ugly out there.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a little shift happening where people are more interested in that. And there's a mindfulness movement going on where people are trying to build these relationships with themselves and kind of wear them on their sleeves. But I think we have a long way to go still, because I want more people to just be able to show up as they are. I don't even do it successfully all the time. I'm still battling so much of that inner stuff that we mentioned. So I feel it's an ever ending process for me. And I think that I want as many people to come along on it, even though it's never ending. It's really rewarding each step of the way.
Yeah. And let's talk about compassion. And that's coming up a lot right now because everything we do right now, when we leave the home or don't leave the home, is rooted in having compassion for ourselves, but also for the impact we have on other people. So I'm trying to like weave that word in more, but I think just in general, it's something our culture needs to work on. Do you see us coming out of this more compassionate or less compassionate? What do you think the work's going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. As I kind of mentioned, I don't think that there's any right or wrong right now because it's an unprecedented time. Like, there's still like morality, sure, but like, I think that everyone is probably doing the best that they can with the most knowledge that they have and with the best intention. So I feel like compassion a lot of times is just like being empathetic and meeting people where they're at and understanding that like you might have different knowledge than they have and they might have other things that you don't know. And like, how can we all just kind of like meet in the center and walk together rather than assume the worst of people? That's kind of what I think of when I think of compassion. And so that's kind of like, even when I'm doing like stuff like this, I'm never like pitching myself as someone who has the answers, because I think that would be contradictory to that thing. I'm doing what feels best for me, and I'm meeting other people on their journey and trying to figure out what's best for them. And I think that we all just have to do that. With like no one's right, no one's wrong. The goal is to meet people in the middle, essentially.
Yeah, stay on the journey. That's what I tell some people all the time too. I don't know where we're going to go, and I don't know what we should, just stay on it. Stay on it. It's a life's work. Not everything's resolvable. So stay on the journey. So we had some questions that came in that I'd love for you to answer with us.
Oh, fun.
This one's good. This one says, "You're an OG queer icon and I love you. Can you please, for the gays out there, say you're tacky and I hate you?"
Oh my God, no, that would go against the vow that I made to never say that again. But I'll send you the meme. Just
please,
like text me your phone number.
I love that. It's funny how some things just stick with you and they come back to haunt you, but I appreciate your vow. Hold that vow. We have another question that came in, and this one asks, where do you find most of your inspiration for songwriting comes from?
Yeah, most of my inspiration for songwriting actually comes from nature. I mean, I don't write songs about nature, but when you actually just mentioned nature. When I'm in nature is kind of when I'm most at my creative. I do most of my writing like by taking hikes. I go on like 2 hour, 3 hour long hikes, and I just kind of let ideas marinate in my head, and I bring a notepad. And something about being out there with the world, because the universe is kind of like unlimited, right? It's unlimited potential. There's so much we don't know, and there's so much to be discovered. And so by putting myself in nature, I feel like I'm putting myself in a part of the universe and kind of unlocking my own unlimited potential, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also just so soothing for our nervous system. Someone asked me the other day, why are so many people talking about and purchasing plants right now? And if you drive by these nurseries, the lines are down the street, but I think it's because we are feeling so disconnected from the outside world that we're trying to bring it into our homes, and it's so soothing. So it's not surprising that it inspires your songwriting.
Yeah, love nature.
And also, what a beautiful way to work through your mental health. Do you see that part showing up in your songwriting?
Oh, sure. That's kind of like one of the ways that I found my voice when I was like struggling with this inner conflict, because I feel like music is this excuse almost to kind of say what you want to say without saying it, and to really like reach in for feeling and pull that out and put it into something that's meaningful. And also music is a great way for people to connect. So it was the first time I ever really like dug deep, figured out what I felt, put it onto paper, and then someone was like, hey, I feel that way too. And it kind of like brought me out of the shadows of, oh, I'm the only one going through this. Like, what can I do on my journey to like connect with people about this and also to grow as an artist and a person?
Beautiful. And this next question asks, what would you say to kids out there who are bullied for embracing their sexual orientation?
I get this question, advice for the youth. I kind of just always lean towards that all the cliches turn out to be true. So I could like say a bunch of them right now. I'm sure I will. Like, be yourself. There's only one of you, and like, you know, like stick it to the man, if we want to quote School of Rock, and like all these things. I think that all these cliches turn out to be true, but we don't think growing up that they do. Like we want to stay in this place where we're the victim, which is totally okay because people are being bullied and they have a lot of feeling, and that's totally justified. But if you can find any room for the truth that like you are enough and that you should just be yourself, and all these things that you shrug off as not true because you don't feel that way, if you can find a way to like gravitate towards that truth, even though you don't feel that way, I promise like you'll be ahead of the curve, because that's kind of what you discover later in life, is that all these things that you always shrugged off as irrelevant to how you felt are true, in my opinion.
Yeah, and can be just such a powerful part of your story later in life, and things that kind of wind up strengthening you and driving you. Brian Falduto, thank you so much for being a part of the show and for everything you're out there doing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Have a beautiful night.
Yeah, you too.
I love that. Sometimes the most beautiful parts of us, our strength, actually can come from some of our historical wounds. So yeah, we want to do work on them. And right now, get yourself into some therapy. Also see what you can do in motivation wise with that. I know my career has often driven by some of the things that happened in my past, and now powerfully have made me wanting to not allow that to occur in the world or in other people's lives. So there can be beauty in it later in life. Nature. Also bring that into your life in any ways that you can. We got some questions. If you want to join the conversation, you can send your questions into our Loveline DMs or by tweeting them with the hashtag I'm listening. We'll be answering those throughout the show and, of course, all throughout the week. This question asks, I found out that one of my job's regulars passed away from COVID today. She was a nurse, and it sent me down a wormhole of sadness, and my supervisor shamed me for crying at work. How can workplaces better handle grieving employees? First off, sorry to hear that someone passed away. It's a very difficult thing to experience. And then to also have your own natural grieving process shamed. I think the display of emotion is so vital to not just working through what's happening, but also just to normalize mental health. And that's what we're trying to do. Mental health shouldn't be something that has shame. And so feeling a full range of emotions is part of mental health, not just expressing and feeling the positive ones. Every time someone publicly cries or talks about or expresses sadness or anxiety, you are doing powerful work on yourself in terms of mental health, but also normalizing it out in the world. So I want to advocate for more crying while at work. And I know that not all employers want to hear that, but I care about mental health. And so I'm sorry that that happened. I think that there's beautiful space for people to sit down and talk about the need for that. Don't let that be shamed. And I want employers to allow space for that to happen. But maybe it's also about sitting down with other employees who might have also known this person who passed and processing it and sharing with those individuals because they've been touched by that as well. All right, let's now go to Jenny Delacruz, author, family therapist, and grief and trauma expert. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Chris.
Of course. Are you in Philadelphia right now?
Yes, I am. I'm in Philadelphia, city of brotherly love.
That's my hometown.
Oh, all right.
PA. Good to see you. So let's talk about mental health. How is yours right now?
Well, thank you for asking. I try to really take great care of my mental health, making sure that, I'm eating well, exercising, having fun with my husband every now and then. And, as a mental health therapist, I try to pretty much practice what I preach. And so, every now and then I go ahead and see my therapist, I go ahead and journal when I need to. And because I'm human. And so I think that's really important. These are basic, but it's really key.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been going back to some of the basics as well. So my own therapy, journaling is also really good for me. And as we've kind of been talking about a lot, music, I've been leaning more into the use of music to help kind of calm me and soothe me. So congratulations, you have a second book coming out. Mama, Can I Sleep With You Tonight? Helping children cope with the effects of COVID. Now, very, very important. So thank you for writing such a book. I think that there's a lot of families and parents that are going to definitely access this and utilize it. Talk to us about what we want to know around that topic.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that children experience loss differently than we do as adults. We're all going through this together, right? The loss of normalcy in our lives, and many, sadly, the loss of loved ones. But it's important to know how it's manifested in children. And so this book is going to definitely give parents just the tools they need to see that. And I'll give you a personal example. I actually have two boys, 6 and one that's about to turn 4. And on April 5th at 3 a.m., my 4-year-old came knocking on my door. Okay. He wanted to share his big feelings and fears surrounding all the changes that were happening in the best way a 3-year-old can. And, of course, after he shared, he quickly fell asleep, and I was totally up. And so I did what I always tell my clients not to do. I pick up my phone and I start writing. I start writing about what I observed in my children, the children in my community, and also, the families that I'm working with as a counselor. And this is how this book came to be. It starts with a story between a mother and her son. And at the end of the book, I list the 5 stages of grief, right? Which are denial, anger, sadness, bargaining, and acceptance. And then I give, like I mentioned, tools. And so, when you look at grief in children, it can look very interesting. You might see a child going through an increase of temper tantrums and mood swings, and you might say, what's going on? And not realizing that these stages are not linear. And so you might have a child who at one moment is going through anger, one day, sadness another day, bargaining, and then back to anger. And then this can also happen in one day. So can you imagine for that child what that is like, and even for that parent, right, to see all this going on? And so I try to provide different tips, such as using art to help children to express themselves. And I think that is a great tool. I actually have another story using art. My 3-year-old, I'm gonna pick on him again.
Okay, God bless him.
I was getting ready to go to the grocery store, and he said, Mommy, can you get some Oreos? I said, all right, sure. And I couldn't believe they were out of Oreos. I mean, I can understand Lysol wipes. Oreos.
I probably bought them. I'm a big Oreos fan. I tweet about that a lot, but continue.
So I came home and I, telling him, he was really ready, because we like to have our Oreos with cookies, story time and cookies. And he was just like, where are the Oreos? And I said, I'm sorry, they were all out. There's, tons of people shopping, and lots of things are missing because a lot of people are gathering things, that they need. And he seemed like he was okay. But 2 days later, he was just more frustrated than usual. And so I gave him a piece of paper and some crayons, and he was really going at it. Next thing I know, he was drawing a picture of me. So I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And he said, Mommy, you're at the grocery store and you're so angry. There's no more Oreos. And look, you're stomping your feet. And I said, wow. And you know what? I was so thrilled that he had this tool to use to express himself, because he could have easily took it out on his 6-year-old brother, and that could have snowballed into something else, and I would have not known where the source of that was. And so these children are dealing with these changes, but sometimes they don't have the language to really express them, and that's where art comes into play.
And I love that. Because you're normalizing for a lot of parents that they might not be familiar with what they're seeing, and I love that. And then I love the use of that tool, because like you're saying, children don't always have the words or the capacity or even sometimes the safety to express what they're going through, and art can be that container. So let me ask you this: are there any things that parents want to be aware of not discussing in this difficult time with their children?
Well, definitely try not to watch the news with them. Okay. It's kind of hard because it's everywhere. You go on Facebook and it's the news, but I would say definitely try not to watch the news. I think you can explain it to them if they ask, questions. And I think you have to kind of gauge the age of the child, right? Of course, a 3-year-old and talking to a 10-year-old, you're going to have two different conversations. So I would say, to be mindful of your child. Some children are more prone to anxiety than others as well. And so it's really important to be mindful of, how that child, their nature is, and to really be sensitive of what you share. Ask yourself, is this something that they really need to know? But I think that if children do ask a question, we should answer honestly. I think that's really important. And, I talk about having that communication that is clear, but at the same time, it's important to get on their level. So with children, you might want to, small children, get on the floor and just, play with them a little bit and check in and say, how are you really doing? It's a huge difference when you're towering over them, and asking them, hey, how's everything going? Versus get on the floor on their level, we can make that eye contact. Kind of like how you was saying, that feeling of safety. I think that's really important.
Right. And I'm glad that you wrote a children's book, because again, for the parents that still feel unsure how to kind of walk through this, the book is something they can read with their children, and it kind of holds their hands through it. So I always appreciate, because I think it's really easy for us as therapists to just consider the impact on adults. And a lot of the material that's written around these topics is always written for adults, by adults. And so thank you for doing that. Also, your first book, Fridays with Miss Melange, I looked at the purpose of that, and I loved, you said it was about critical thinking and strong self-identity, such stunning stuff that's needed for our children. So I wanted to give a shout out to that. And also your Storytime YouTube channel, which also is related to this.
Yes. And so I created this channel because I wanted my children, my boys who are biracial, by the way, Haitian and Filipino descent, to see picture books that celebrate diversity of different cultures, history, art, and also to make sure that each book ended with a question to promote critical thinking skills. And so it was more so something that I wanted them to enjoy. But, interestingly enough, it really took off once social isolation came to play, because parents were looking for resources for their children while they were homeschooling. And so I'm glad that this can also benefit families as well.
Yeah.
And this upcoming book will also be on that site.
And talk about the diversity. I was watching the video and the different diversity of the characters in terms of wearing hijab and the racial representation. I was like, this is stunning. So thank you for putting that in there and looking into that. We had some questions that came in that I'd love for you to answer with us.
Sure.
This first one asks, I'd like to get into trauma counseling, but I'm a pretty sensitive, empathetic person. Is it difficult staying strong in sessions?
Yeah. Wow. That's really good. I think that really when I think about my clients, they're the ones that are strong, right? They're coming to me, a perfect stranger, and I'm sitting here really listening, and I'm reframing their experiences. And so I think that counseling will help. While you're helping others, you also acknowledge where you're at. And I honestly believe that that if you really are concerned about trauma counseling, you can definitely do it as long as you have supervision. I think that it's possible, because at times as clinicians, as therapists, psychologists, we all have our moments of weakness, right? And that's where supervision comes to play. And so there are tools out there for mental health practitioners to tap into. So I wouldn't let that intimidate you at all.
Beautifully said. I think working the field has been just so transformative for me as well. And just shout out to all the mental health professionals out there. Self-care, self-care, self-care. Don't burn yourselves out right now, right? This next one asks, what was the main factor that inspired you to write this children's book? Great idea.
Yeah, as I mentioned, my son, and then, I noticed that children were also afraid, right? We talk about grief, but we don't talk about fear. You have small children, 2 or 3, who are learning to read social cues, and they look out the window and they see everyone wearing a mask, and they can't really tell if there's a smile or a frown behind there. And so I wanted parents to be able to reshape and reframe those experiences to say, like in my book, I mentioned, even though you see that person with a mask, it's the same person behind that mask. And think about our dentists that we go to, who has a mask and goggles, And I also think about the children in the inner city who are hearing like increase of sirens, and that can be scary too. And in this book, also, I talk about framing that experience to say, when you hear a siren, that means help is on its way. And so I really wanted parents to have that tool in their belt.
Beautiful. Because I think it's easy for us to sometimes underestimate that children are still open systems. They have eyes, they're feeling things, they're seeing things, they're experiencing things. So thank you, especially for that tool about the R piece. What a beautiful resource. Jenny Delacruz, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Pleasure.
Good luck with the book.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Take care, Chris.
It's all about holistic care. Everyone in our lives and our family is being impacted. And as we discussed, sometimes the children need different tools and resources. So definitely speak to them on their level, provide them some artistic outlets. Often, like Jenny Delacruz was saying, children don't have the words or the ability to put it into complete thoughts. And sometimes drawing or playing it is a way that they can express what they're feeling to us. So definitely hold space for that. Everyone's impacted. And also to the mental health care workers out there, it is impacting us. We are humans as well. So make sure you are focusing on your mental health care, focusing on self-care. I have amped up all of that myself so that I don't burn out and I can be available to all those I need to be available to. If you want to join the conversation, please send all your questions to the Loveline DM page, or you can do it by tweeting out the hashtag I'm listening. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific. That's 8 p.m. Eastern on all the radio.com handles. If you want to go back and watch past shows and episodes, again, on all the radio.com handles, they are all listed there. As always, thanks for hanging out, and you all have a beautiful, beautiful night.